Hi, I'm Nika from Perch. At Perch, we wanted to create an educational platform that will get you more familiar with weight and performance technology, velocity-based training, and our product all at the same time. So we went ahead and created this platform. Our goals are to seed you with practical application tools, eliminate myths, and get you more comfortable with weight room tech, VBT, and Perch. Everything that we talk about will be based in the research and from our practitioners to you. To do this, we're going to cover the past, present, and future of VBT, the science behind this module of strength training and performance monitoring as a whole, get you more familiar with using velocity zones, percent cutoffs, auto-regulation, goals, and overall programming with VBT. We'll go through a full Perch product tutorial. And lastly, we'll cover the practical implementation in every single weight room. Keep in mind as we go through this that VBT is just one of the things that Perch enables. But we'll touch on the importance of weight and performance monitoring as a whole and learn a ton along the way. Let's get started. The origins of velocity-based training are multifaceted. Here are some of the major pivot points in the history of using velocity to dictate load through time. The concept of using velocity in a weight room came about in the mid to late 1960s through Russian sports scientist Yuri Verkhoshansky. It was later advanced further in the 1980s with R.A. Roman. Eventually, velocity-based training was brought to the US and popularized by Louis Simmons at Westside Barbell in the US in the 90s and into the 2000s. Dr. Brian Mann came on the scene with extensive VBT research and eventual publication of his book, Developing Explosive Athletes in the 2010s. Now, VBT is a common tool used by sports performance coaches across the world. Researchers continue to learn more about the application of it as well as time goes on. Some additional notable VBT research today are Dr. Brian Mann, Dr. Daniel Baker, Dr. Tim Sukumel, Dr. Jonathan Weekly, Dr. Mladen Jovanovic, Dr. Fernanda Pareja Blanco, and Dr. Juan Jose Gonzalo Badillo. These researchers continue to push the envelope forward among many others. Velocity-based training is still in its early days and origins as a sports performance practitioner. Stay tuned and check out some of the research that we posted. Next up, I want to take you through some methods of measuring velocity-based training. There are currently three main methods of measuring velocity of an implement in the weight room. The first is through a linear position transducer, or LPT, and this was the original method of measurement after stopwatches. The second is accelerometers, or IMUs, which are typically worn on the moving person or on the implement. The third is camera-based systems like Perch, which are typically mounted on a weight rack or sitting on the floor. There are some pros and cons of each method that I want to take you through. LPTs, or linear position transducers, are tether-based devices, and how quickly that tether unspools is what provides a velocity readout. This method gets a little bit cumbersome, as the tether needs to strap on and off of the barbell between sets. Devices often sit on the ground of the weight room floor and require setup and breakdown pre- and post-lift. Accelerometers, or IMUs, are attached to a human or a barbell. Moving in a direction in space will output a velocity reading. Because they can pick up a lot of external movement noise, the data can sometimes be inaccurate or unreliable. The device is also a one device to one person ratio, so the required amount of units is a consideration. They're also a high contact device, and so they can be easily broken. Camera-based systems, like Perch, are mounted up and out of the way on a weight rack to passively collect and output data without any interruption to your weight room workflow. Depth, displacement, and time measurements provide velocity outputs, power outputs, eccentric metrics, and many more. One device per rack means more athletes can use fewer devices. The field of view must be considered because if you're not in the frame of the device, it will not be able to measure your movement accurately. Ultimately, the device that's best for you is going to be the one that fits within your organization, your environment, your weight room, and with your athletes. Next up, I want to touch on the future of velocity-based training and weight and performance monitoring. Velocity-based training has come a long way in the last few decades, from manual handheld stopwatches to now non-contact devices that are capable of measuring much more than just velocity, the growth potential for this type of technology is astronomical. For instance, and we're biased, but Perch is able to measure and output 11 different metrics in live time instantaneously. As a cloud-based system, all athlete data is saved by rep, by set, by exercise, and by athlete, and immediately available to view on the tablet upon set completion, as well as in the Perch web application, where data is stored longitudinally and coaches can structure their organization, monitor athlete performance trends over time, and view insights that inform progress. With the competitive landscape the way it currently is and only getting more intense, and with devices like Perch and others consistently pushing the envelope of what is possible in sports performance in the weight room, velocity-based training has expanded to become a more complete weight room performance monitoring methodology. Of course, loads, sets, and reps are tracked, but now peak velocity, peak power, mean power, eccentric mean velocity, eccentric time, time to peak velocity, time to peak power, velocity at 100 milliseconds, displacement, and total work are all measured in output. All of that combined with web-based insights and analytics. More importantly, Perch is expanding its offerings to include evaluation via jump assessments and additional insights for readiness and fatigue based on those, along with a weight room planner to build workouts. And our competitors are dedicated to continuing to push the envelope forward. Weight room performance technology is coming into its own, and there is much, much more to build on and discover to optimize performance in the weight room and on the field of play. We're excited to be part of it, and we're excited to see what the future holds for velocity-based training and weight room performance monitoring. Welcome to Session 3, the science behind weight room performance monitoring and velocity-based strength training. Everything we talk about in this session is based on the existing research. We will provide cited sources and provide a reading list of research articles at the end for you to continue to learn from outside of this course. The first topic that we're going to discuss is the importance of using velocity-based training over or even with percentage-based training. In the realm of strength and conditioning, the shift towards velocity-based training, or VBT, over traditional percentage-based training has garnered attention for its ability to provide more personalized and dynamic workouts. Unlike percentage-based training, which relies on a predetermined load tied to an individual's 1 rep max, or 1RM, VBT takes into account an athlete's real-time performance metrics, existing fatigue levels, and general readiness for the day's session. This ultimately means that workouts are tailored to an athlete's current abilities, allowing for more precise adjustments and minimizing the risk of overtraining or injury. All of this is obviously assuming maximal intent, which needs to be coached, but can certainly be enhanced by objective metrics that drive competition. Existing research indicates that measured athletes' 1 rep maxes can actually fluctuate pretty drastically on a daily basis. Some studies suggest an 18% fluctuation in either direction on a given day, equaling a 36% range. The reality may be more consistently close to single-digit fluctuations, but it's still important to take into account when we're talking about high-volume athletes in a risky environment. Other disadvantages to testing 1RMs include taking training days off in order to test athletes and injury risk during testing protocols. Ultimately, VBT introduces a dynamic element to strength training and programming, acknowledging that an athlete's capacity fluctuates and takes into account the optimized training capabilities on a daily basis. By monitoring velocity, coaches can optimize training loads, ensuring that each session aligns with an athlete's ability that day. This approach not only enhances performance, but also fosters a more adaptable and responsive training environment. Lastly, the objective outputs of VBT devices can foster a competitive environment, validate coach subjective feedback, and motivate athletes to work hard, try hard, and maximize intent. Maximal intent over time, regulated by velocity in the weight room, leads to healthy athletes and optimal performance. The next thing we're going to talk about is the relationship between velocity, load, and intensity in strength-based resistance training. In strength-based resistance training, or strength training, the relationship between velocity, load, and intensity is crucial for designing effective workout programs. This is the basis on which all coaches build and write programs. Regardless of whether or not you've used velocity-based training devices before, you most likely have an idea of the speed at which you want to see an athlete move a barbell based on the load, sets, and reps you've programmed for them. The introduction of velocity simply serves as an additional parameter to understand performance. Velocity as a direct indicator of an athlete's capability or capacity to move a specific load also helps practitioners understand athlete efficiencies, deficiencies, and propensities to generate force. As load increases, velocity typically decreases, reflecting the increased demand on the neuromuscular system. All of this exists across the spectrum, and it's the coach's job to know what the spectrum looks like for each athlete, how to tailor their programs to improve their existing profile based on sport or positional needs. Understanding this relationship allows coaches to tailor training intensities more precisely, ensuring that athletes work within optimal performance zones throughout a training year. More than likely, you periodize your training programs with microcycles, within mesocycles, within macrocycles, completing a training year. VBT fits nicely into this existing architecture. Sometimes of the year, you'll be lifting moderate weights at moderate speeds for power, sometimes heavy weights at low speeds for strength, and sometimes lighter weights at higher speeds for speed. All of this makes up the three foundational principles for athlete development in the weight room: strength, power, speed. With the introduction of velocity-based training, you can profile athletes, understand their existing capabilities, and improve their abilities throughout the training year and back it up with objective data from your VBT device. This allows for more regular check-in and monitoring via data. The ability to manipulate velocity and load provides a nuanced approach to periodization. By strategically adjusting these variables, coaches can create targeted training phases that cater to different aspects of an athlete's development. This dynamic approach enhances adaptability, promotes continual progression, and minimizes the risk of plateaus in strength gains. The third thing we'll talk about is the value behind load velocity profiling to establish baselines and use as a roadmap for athlete performance. We previously mentioned profiling athletes using velocity and the value behind it. Load velocity profiling is a cornerstone of velocity-based training, offering coaches a comprehensive understanding of an athlete's unique performance characteristics. By establishing baselines through systematic profiling, coaches gain insights into an athlete's optimal load and velocity zones. This data-driven approach provides a roadmap for designing customized training programs that maximize individual potential. The protocol for load velocity profiling is fairly simple. Warm up as usual, then lift various loads from around 40 to 90% of an estimated 1 rep max. If you don't know where to start or have no 1RM, just start lifting increasingly heavy loads and see what velocities result. Devices like Perch will automatically generate a load velocity profile for you to visualize. This protocol builds your load velocity profile, and you can tell if you're load deficient, velocity deficient, or well balanced based on the slope of your LV profile curve, alongside the needs analysis of your sport or position. If it's determined that you need more speed, then you can spend a micro or mesocycle working at lighter loads and faster velocities. And if it's determined that you need more strength, then you can spend a micro or mesocycle working at heavier loads and slower velocities. Retest at the end of the cycle to determine if you've developed the desired adaptation, and keep training. Load velocity profiling not only aids in setting initial training parameters, but also facilitates ongoing adjustments as athletes progress. This iterative process allows coaches to adapt workouts in real time, ensuring training remains challenging yet manageable. Ultimately, load velocity profiling empowers coaches to make informed decisions, fostering a more efficient and effective athlete development process in the weight room. The fourth thing that we're going to talk about is the value and importance behind using objective data to inform weight room performance. In the pursuit of athletic excellence, relying on objective data is paramount. Velocity-based training leverages technology to generate precise, real-time metrics that go beyond subjective assessments. Objective data, such as live feedback on 11 metrics from Perch, velocity profiles, and performance analytics, provides coaches with a holistic view of an athlete's capabilities, enabling evidence-based decision-making in the weight room. Utilizing objective data enhances the accuracy of load prescriptions, mitigating the risk of undertraining or overtraining. Coaches can track progress, identify potential areas for improvement, and tailor interventions to address specific needs. By embracing a data-driven approach, athletes and coaches alike can navigate the complexities of strength and conditioning with greater precision and confidence, validate their decisions, their programs to higher-ups within the department. Next, I want to touch on the value and importance of objective feedback to enhance weight room performance and on-field performance. Objective feedback, alongside the art of strength coaching, forms the cornerstone of effective performance in the weight room. Devices that enable velocity-based training and overall weight room monitoring integrate immediate, quantifiable feedback into each session, fostering a continuous improvement mindset. Athletes receive real-time information about their performance, enabling them to make on-the-fly adjustments and optimize their training experience alongside a coach. Moreover, it helps them buy into the process and continues to build trust and foster relationships with coaches and teammates in the weight room. Objective feedback also serves as a motivator, providing athletes with tangible evidence of their progress. This positive reinforcement enhances engagement and adherence to training programs. Additionally, coaches can use objective feedback to address technical flaws, refine movement patterns, and fine-tune training protocols, leading to more efficient and sustainable performance gains in the weight room. Next, let's touch on the value of using velocity-based training in the weight room for developing sport-specific traits. Beyond general strength development, velocity-based training offers a targeted approach to cultivating sport-specific traits. By aligning training modalities with the demands of a particular sport, coaches can enhance athletes' abilities in ways that directly translate to on-field performance. For example, a sprinter may focus on explosive movements with higher velocities, while a powerlifter may emphasize strength at lower velocities. An O lineman must be incredibly strong, but also incredibly explosive, so they would need to work across the spectrum. Using a VBT device gives you that feedback. This sport-specific approach not only optimizes physical attributes, but also hones neuromuscular patterns essential for success in specific disciplines. Integrating velocity-based training into the weight room empowers coaches to design programs that bridge the gap between traditional strength training and the nuanced requirements of various sports. Now I want to briefly touch on the established velocity-based training zones. We'll go into greater detail on this later, but for now, we're just going to cover this briefly around mean velocity. So based on Brian Mann's research, there are 5 established velocity zones. More recent research tends to indicate that can be narrowed down to 3, and more research is forthcoming about peak velocity versus mean velocity zones and so forth. There is way more to learn about this modality of strength training. The 5 zones are starting strength, speed strength, strength speed, accelerative strength, and absolute strength. They adhere nearly perfectly to similarly named percentage-based traits. These velocity-based training zones serve as a guide for structuring workouts based on an athlete's capabilities and goals. These zones, simplified to speed, power, and strength, provide a framework for tailoring training intensities and volumes. Maximal strength zones focus on heavy loads and slower velocities. Power zones, so your strength, speed, and accelerative strength, balance load and velocity. And speed zones, or speed strength zones, prioritize lighter loads and higher velocities. By strategically incorporating exercises within these zones, coaches can systematically target different aspects of an athlete's performance spectrum and train them across their neuromuscular capabilities for optimal adaptation. This nuanced approach ensures a well-rounded development that aligns with the athlete's specific objectives. As athletes progress, coaches can adjust these zones dynamically, ensuring continual adaptation and improvement across a training season, year, and career. Next up, let's talk about the value of autoregulation using velocity-based training. This last thing that I want to touch on here encompasses all of the previous talking points regarding velocity-based training. Autoregulation. It's a big word, but it's a key component of VBT or velocity-based training. It introduces a dynamic and individualized dimension to the workout experience. Unlike fixed percentage-based programs, autoregulation acknowledges that an athlete's readiness can vary from day to day. By continuously monitoring velocity during training sessions, coaches can adjust loads in real time, optimizing the training stimulus based on the athlete's current state of fatigue and readiness. Autoregulation through velocity-based training enhances the precision of load management. It allows athletes to train at their highest sustainable intensities on any given day, promoting consistent progress while minimizing the risk of overtraining or injury. This flexibility is particularly valuable in the context of variable demands athletes face, such as competition schedules, external stressors, and recovery status. Furthermore, autoregulation fosters a heightened sense of athlete engagement and responsibility. By empowering athletes to actively participate in load adjustments based on their real-time performance, a collaborative partnership is established between coach and athlete. This shared decision-making process not only promotes athlete autonomy, but also cultivates a deeper understanding of individualized training needs, contributing to long-term success and sustainability within the weight room and the coach-athlete relationship. To summarize, velocity-based training and autoregulation are both strategic tools that optimize training outcomes by adapting to the ever-changing dynamics of an athlete's physiological and psychological state. It aligns training loads with an athlete's current capacity, promoting a responsive and personalized approach to strength training. Check out some of the most impactful VBT research articles of our time so far, and we'll add additional resources for you to look through on your own time. Welcome to Session 4, Understanding Velocity Zones and Setting Thresholds and Goals Using a Velocity-Based Training Device. There are 5 main velocity zones to velocity-based strength training. The metric here is mean velocity. This is largely based on the research and is based in strength training movements, not ballistic or Olympic movements. These 5 zones have also been challenged lately to be reduced to 3 main zones. We're going to talk about all 5, and then we'll talk about how to simplify and reduce them. The first zone is our absolute strength zone. That's typically sub 0.5 meter per second. The absolute strength zone focuses on lifting heavy loads at slower velocities. To be clear, every zone is about maximal intent. The velocities will just be slower simply because you cannot move the weight any faster. This zone is essential for those seeking to increase overall strength. Training in this zone induces neuromuscular adaptations, enhancing force production. It is particularly beneficial during off-season phases or when foundational training periods need the adaptation to emphasize building a solid strength base. The second zone is our accelerative strength zone, so between 0.5 and 0.75 meters per second. In this accelerative strength zone, individuals lift moderate to heavy loads at moderate velocity. Again, maximal intent, as fast as possible at that load. This places emphasis on speed and power development. Athletes looking to enhance their ability to generate force quickly, such as sprinters or athletes in sports requiring explosive movements, benefit from training in this zone. It aids in improving sport-specific performance and can be integrated into pre-competition phases of training. The third zone is our strength speed zone, between 0.75 and 1.0 meter per second. The strength speed zone involves lifting moderate loads at a moderate velocity, bridging the gap between absolute strength and speed. This zone is ideal for athletes aiming to apply force rapidly while lifting substantial loads. Incorporating strength speeds training is valuable for athletes needing power production in their sport and in their training. The speed strength zone, so between 1.0 and 1.3 meters per second, is our next zone. The speed strength zone combines lighter loads with high velocity, targeting the development of speed of muscular firing rate and overall speed training and intent. This zone is where speed is king. Training in this zone enhances the ability to maintain speed and power output and teaches athletes intent. The last zone, the fifth zone, is our starting strength zone. That's going to be above 1.3 meters per second. Starting strength zone is extremely lightweight at extremely high speeds. Very rarely will athletes train here, but the best use of this zone is typically for athletes of younger training ages who need reps to groove neuromuscular patterns over adding load. In this way, they achieve neuromuscular fatigue with lower risk of injury than adding load to a dysfunctional movement pattern. Those are our 5 main zones, and an argument can be made to reduce those 5 zones to just 3 zones. So our speed zone at around 0.9 to 1.3 meters per second, our power zone at around 0.5 to 0.9 meters per second, and our strength zone at sub 0.5 meters per second. And many coaches do that. Keep in mind, these speed recommendations aren't perfect and you will find variability within your athletes. More research needs to be done on this. Regardless of the zone names or assigned speeds, working across the spectrum will enhance neuromuscular capabilities of athletes of all training ages and ensure they're both strong, powerful, and fast. Lastly, setting goals or thresholds using velocity-based training zones is not just about performance optimization, but also adherence to a structured training plan. In most VBT devices, you're able to set goals. Research indicates that setting a goal for a velocity instead of just saying move it fast enhances adaptation and improves performance at a greater rate. Additionally, goal setting establishes clear objectives for each phase of training, which increases the likelihood of individuals to stay motivated and committed to the protocol and process. Velocity-based training zones provide a tangible framework for progress tracking. Regularly reassessing goals based on velocity data ensures that training remains challenging and adaptive, promoting long-term adherence and the development of desired physical traits. Ultimately, velocity-based training zones empower individuals to take a scientific and personalized approach to their strength training, unlocking the door to sustained success and continuous improvement. Welcome to session 5, where we'll talk about the practical implementation of velocity-based training and how to use each metric Perch offers to understand how performance improves and changes over time. Let's talk about a few different scenarios. Imagine you're a strength coach at a mid-major college. You have a number of high-profile athletes on the track and field team who came in last year. And you have one sprinter in particular who came in as a promising recruit right out of high school. He knows he can be great, so he dedicated himself to training, both on the track and in the weight room. Initially, he got quite a bit faster, but this year he slowed down quite a bit, and you're not really sure why, but you decide to look into it. So you get a new low velocity profile on him and compare his incoming LV profile to this year's. As you suspected, his slope has changed. He's now skewed towards strength, but he's losing velocity, meaning he's great at generating force, just not very quickly. You realize this is the antithesis of what a sprinter needs, and you decide to train him for a few blocks in faster zones at lighter loads. It works. He gets faster, and now you profile him monthly to ensure his adaptations will help him perform better on the track. Now imagine you're a high school strength coach. You have 400 athletes come through your weight room in a condensed period of time during the day. You are one coach to oversee a lot of athletes, and you're frustrated that you cannot catch every rep on the floor. You have no video tools that are practical enough to use in a busy weight room. But luckily, you know Perch provides a ton of data stored by athlete that gives you an idea of performance. And more importantly, it has a bar path feature that can help you understand technique issues. You track this over time, and as the overlay of those reps gets closer and closer, you know athletes are gaining proficiency through movement. The time you spend post-lift ensuring you didn't miss any major issues provides a sense of calm and affirms that you're doing a good job coaching these athletes. Lastly, imagine you're a Power 5 football strength coach. Last year you won the league and a bowl game and had a great season, but your star performers graduated or went to the league, and this year is off to a rocky start. The head coach thinks athletes look slow and aren't performing well on the field. He comes directly to you to pick a bone. Luckily, you have Perch and longitudinal data. You pull data from last year at this time and compare it to this year so far, and it's the most beautiful validation you've ever seen. Athletes are not only lifting heavier loads, they're lifting them faster, meaning they're getting more efficient at producing force. Not to mention, power outputs are all increasing too. These athletes are in great shape in the weight room, and it's up to the sport coach to translate it into a cohesive football team. These are all real examples from Perch customers for how VBT can be used to complete the picture, provide job validation, and improve athlete performance. For more practical application, I want to talk in more depth about each of the metrics Perch enables and how they can help inform athlete performance. There's going to be a lot of information here, but we'll break it down by metric to give you a better overall understanding. The first metric that we're going to talk about is peak velocity. Peak velocity in the weight room can provide insights into an athlete's performance by indicating the following. Number 1, explosiveness. Higher peak velocity correlates with better explosiveness and rapid force development. Number 2, strength levels. Higher peak velocity at given load suggests greater relative strength. Number 3, power output. Combined with load, peak velocity indicates an athlete's dynamic power capabilities. Number 4, fatigue monitoring. Changes in peak velocity can signal fatigue levels, guiding adjustments in training. Number 5, individualization. Peak velocity helps tailor training programs based on an athlete's unique velocity profile. Number 6, technique assessment. Peak velocity indicates changes in lifting technique and movement efficiency. Number 7, injury prevention. Sudden or consistent declines in peak velocity may signal overtraining or injury risk. Number 8, progress tracking. Improvements in peak velocity over time reflect progress in strength and power. Next, let's talk about mean velocity. We covered these mean velocity zones in greater depth, but here are some more details on what insight mean velocity can give us to athlete performance. Number 1, strength levels. Mean velocity reflects the average speed at which an athlete lifts a load, offering insight into overall strength. Number 2, power output. While peak velocity emphasizes maximum speed, mean velocity provides a sense of sustained power output over the entire lift. Number 3, endurance and stamina. Athletes maintaining higher mean velocities throughout a workout may demonstrate better endurance and stamina. Number 4, efficiency of movement. Consistent mean velocity may indicate efficient and controlled movement patterns during resistance training exercises. Number 5, fatigue monitoring. Changes in mean velocity over a session can signal fatigue levels, aiding in training adjustments. Number 6, individualization. This tailors training programs based on an athlete's mean velocity profile for optimal performance. Number 7, technique assessment. Variations in mean velocity can highlight changes in lifting technique and movement efficiency. Number 8, injury prevention. Sudden drops in mean velocity may indicate overtraining or increased injury risk, prompting necessary adjustments. You'll notice that a lot of similarities exist in between peak and mean velocity. You'll see that across metrics. That's really, really helpful. A lot of data is going to give us similar answers. Next, we'll talk about power as a metric. Power is going to be measured in watts. First up, peak power. Number 1, dynamic power. Peak power represents the maximum amount of work performed per unit of time, emphasizing the athlete's explosive strength. Number 2, explosiveness. Higher peak power values indicate better ability to generate force rapidly during resistance exercises. Number 3, optimal load selection. Identifying the load at which peak power occurs helps in selecting optimal training loads for power development. Number 4, rate of force development, or RFD. Peak power is closely related to RFD, showcasing an athlete's ability to quickly reach maximal force production. Number 5, sport specificity. Tailoring training to enhance peak power is crucial for sports requiring explosive actions like sprinting, jumping, or throwing. Number 6, individualization. Monitoring individual peak power profiles help customize training programs based on unique performance characteristics. Number 7, fatigue assessment. Changes in peak power output can signal fatigue levels, aiding in the adjustment of training intensities. Number 8, performance tracking. Improvements in peak power over time reflect progress in an athlete's ability to generate explosive force. Now we'll talk a little bit more about mean power. So a few indicators here. Number 1, sustained power output. Mean power reflects the average amount of work performed per unit of time, providing a measurement of sustained power output throughout a lift. Number 2, endurance and stamina. Athletes maintaining higher mean power values over a workout may demonstrate better endurance and stamina during resistance exercises. Number 3, efficiency of work. Consistent mean power values can indicate efficient and controlled movement patterns, contributing to overall workout effectiveness. Number 4, load management. Identifying the load at which mean power is optimized helps in selecting appropriate training loads for development and maintaining power for longer durations. Number 5, individualization. Monitoring individual mean power profiles helps tailor training programs based on an athlete's unique capacity for sustained power. Number 6, fatigue monitoring. Changes in mean power output over a session can signal fatigue levels, aiding in the adjustment of training volume or intensity. Number 7, performance tracking. Improvements in mean power over time reflect progress in an athlete's ability to sustain power output, contributing to overall athletic performance. Again, you'll notice that there are some similarities and some overlaps in mean and peak power metric indicators. Keep that in mind. The next metrics we'll talk about are the eccentric metrics that Perch enables. The first is eccentric mean velocity. Eccentric mean velocity is the average velocity of the eccentric portion of the movement. Here are some ways this metric can be used to inform performance. Number 1, eccentric control. It reflects the average speed at which an athlete lowers a load during the eccentric phase of a lift, offering insights into their control and stability. Number 2, muscle damage and adaptation. Monitoring eccentric mean velocity can provide information on the level of stress placed on muscles during the lengthening phase, contributing to muscle damage and subsequent adaptation. Number 3, load management. Assessing eccentric mean velocity helps in selecting appropriate loads for eccentric focused training, which is valuable for strength development and injury prevention. Number 4, individualization. Tailoring training programs based on an athlete's eccentric mean velocity profile allows for personalized approaches to address specific performance needs. Number 5, rehabilitation. Eccentric training guided by mean velocity can be incorporated into rehabilitation programs to enhance muscle strength and control during lengthening contractions. Number 6, injury prevention. Monitoring changes in eccentric mean velocity can help identify imbalances or weaknesses, contributing to injury prevention strategies. Number 7, technique assessment. Variations in eccentric mean velocity may indicate changes in lifting technique during the lowering phase of a lift. Number 8, performance tracking. Improvements in eccentric mean velocity over time reflect progress in an athlete's ability to control and handle loads during the eccentric phase. A related metric is eccentric time. Here are the ways that eccentric time can be used to inform performance. Number 1, time under tension. Eccentric time represents the duration an athlete spends in the lengthening or lowering phase of the lift, contributing to the overall time under tension for a muscle group. Number 2, muscle activation and fatigue. Monitoring eccentric time helps assess the duration of muscle activation during the lengthening phase and provides insights into potential fatigue levels. Number 3, load management. Controlling and manipulating eccentric time allows for targeted load management, optimizing resistance for muscle adaptation and strength development. Number 4, individualization. Tailoring training programs based on an athlete's eccentric time profile allows for personalized approaches to address specific performance needs and weaknesses. Number 5, injury prevention. Proper control of eccentric time is crucial for injury prevention, as uncontrolled or rapid eccentric movements can increase the risk of muscle strains or other injuries. Number 6, rehabilitation. Eccentric-focused exercises guided by eccentric time can be integrated into rehabilitation programs to enhance muscle strength and control during lengthening contractions. Number 7, technique assessment. Variations in eccentric time may indicate changes in lifting technique during the lowering phase of the lift. Number 8, performance tracking. Monitoring improvements or changes in eccentric time over time reflects progress in an athlete's control and handling of loads during the eccentric phase. Again, there was some overlap there. That's perfectly normal. Keep an eye out for that. The next metric that we're going to talk about is time to peak power. This metric is a timer indicator of how long an athlete took to get to the moment of peak power during the concentric phase of the movement. Here are some things this metric can inform. Number 1, the rate of power development. Again, it measures the time it takes for an athlete to reach their maximum power output during a lift, reflecting their ability to rapidly generate force. Number 2, explosiveness and quickness. A shorter time to peak power suggests greater explosiveness and quickness in the application of force, which is crucial for sports involving rapid movements. Number 3, optimal load selection. Understanding the time to peak power helps in selecting optimal training loads that allow athletes to maximize power output efficiently. Number 4, sport specificity. Tailoring training to minimize the time to peak power is essential for sports that require rapid and explosive actions such as sprinting or jumping. Number 5, individualization. Monitoring individual time to peak power profiles allow for customized training programs based on unique performance characteristics. Number 6, technique assessment. Variations in time to peak power can indicate changes in lifting technique and the efficiency of force application. Number 7, fatigue monitoring. Changes in time to peak power can provide insights on athlete fatigue levels and help adjust training intensity or volume. Number 8, performance tracking. Improvements in time to peak power over time reflect progress in an athlete's ability to quickly and efficiently generate maximal power during resistance training exercises. The next metric is going to be time to peak velocity. This metric is a timer indicator of how long an athlete took to get to the moment peak velocity, again during the concentric phase in the movement. Here's some things this metric can inform. Number 1, rate of velocity development. Again, it measures the time it takes for an athlete to reach their maximum velocity during a lift, reflecting their ability to rapidly accelerate the movement. Number 2, explosiveness and quickness. A shorter time to peak velocity suggests greater explosiveness and quickness in the execution of a lift, crucial for sports involving rapid movements. Number 3, optimal load selection. Understanding the time to peak velocity helps in selecting optimal training loads that allow athletes to maximize velocity efficiently. Number 4, sport specificity. Tailoring training to minimize the time to peak velocity is essential for sports that require explosive actions, such as sprinting or jumping. Number 5, individualization. Monitoring individual time to peak velocity profiles allows for customized training programs based on unique performance characteristics. Number 6, technique assessment. Variations in time to peak velocity can indicate changes in lifting technique and efficiency of force application. Number 7, fatigue monitoring. So changes in time to peak velocity can provide insights into athlete fatigue levels and help adjust training intensity or volume. Number 8, performance tracking. Improvements in time to peak velocity over time reflect progress in an athlete's ability to quickly and efficiently generate maximal velocity during resistance training exercises. Again, similar metrics and a lot of overlap there. The next thing we're going to talk about is velocity at 100 milliseconds. This is the initial concentric portion of the movement. Some things it might indicate are number 1, early force production. It measures the speed at which an athlete initiates movement within the first 100 milliseconds, offering insights into early force production. Number 2, quick start capability. A higher velocity at 100 milliseconds suggests better quick start capability, which is crucial for explosive movements in sports. Number 3, the rate of force development. Early velocity data reflects the rapidity with which an athlete can develop force in the initial phase of a lift. Number 4, optimal load selection. Understanding velocity at 100 milliseconds helps in selecting optimal training loads for maximizing early force production. Number 5, sport specificity. Tailoring training to enhance velocity at 100 milliseconds is essential for sports that demand rapid and explosive actions. Number 6, individualization. Monitoring individual velocity at 100 milliseconds profiles allows for customized training programs based on unique performance characteristics. Number 7, technique assessment. Variations in velocity at 100 milliseconds can indicate changes in lifting technique and the efficiency of force application during the early phase of a lift. Number 8, performance tracking. Improvements in velocity at 100 milliseconds over time reflects progress in an athlete's ability to quickly generate force and initiate movement. The next metric we'll talk about is displacement. This is measured in inches and is encompassing the distance traveled. A few things this can help indicate. Number 1, range of motion. It measures the distance covered by the load during a resistance exercise, offering insights into an athlete's flexibility and joint mobility. Number 2, muscle activation. Displacement reflects the extent of muscle contraction and elongation during the movement, contributing to overall muscle activation. Number 3, work output. The product of displacement and force, or displacement and velocity, provides a measurement of the work performed during a lift, aiding in assessing overall exercise intensity. Number 4, load management. Monitoring displacement helps in selecting appropriate training loads that align with an athlete's range of motion and strength capabilities. Number 5, individualization. Tailoring training programs based on an athlete's displacement profile allows for personalized approaches to address specific performance needs. Number 6, technique assessment. Variations in displacement can indicate changes in lifting technique, highlighting the efficiency of the movement pattern and understanding consistency of movement for that athlete. Number 7, fatigue monitoring. Changes in displacement over a session can provide insights into an athlete's fatigue levels and help adjust training volume or intensity. Number 8, performance tracking. improvements in displacement over time reflect progress in an athlete's ability to control and execute movements with greater range and efficiency. Lastly, we'll talk about work. Measured in kilojoules, the amount of work completed is including the number of given sets, reps, and external load inputs. A few things this can help indicate. Number one, energy expenditure. This quantifies the total energy output during a resistance training exercise, offering insights into the metabolic demands of the workout. Number two, training intensity. The amount of work performed helps assess the overall intensity of a training session, aiding in the optimization of workout programs. Number three, muscle endurance. Monitoring work in kilojoules over time reflects an athlete's capacity for sustained effort, contributing to improvements in muscle endurance. Number four, load management. Understanding the energy expended allows for the selection of appropriate training loads, balancing intensity and recovery. Number five, individualization. Tailoring training programs based on an athlete's work profile allows for personalized approaches to address specific energy system requirements. Number six, fatigue monitoring. Changes in work output over a session can provide insights into an athlete's fatigue levels and help adjust training volume or intensity. Number seven, performance tracking. Improvements in work output measured in kilojoules over time reflect progress in an athlete's ability to generate and sustain energy during resistance training exercises. Before we end this session, I also want to introduce you to two simple concepts to use longitudinal data with velocity-based training and understand if performance is objectively improving. The first is tracking speed increases over time at the same weight. Even if your load doesn't increase, your speed may, and that still means you're getting more proficient at generating force, and that still applies to improved athletic performance. Same weight, but faster equals better. The second is shifts in your load velocity profile curve. We talked about this a bit in a previous lesson, but load velocity profiles shifting according to your desired adaptations from training is also a positive thing. As you continue to train across a spectrum, your load velocity profile will shift to the right on the graph, meaning you are lifting heavier loads at faster velocities. Hopefully this provided some insight to how you can use Perch and velocity-based training as an additional tool in your weight room to help athletes continue to improve performance both in your weight room and on their field of play. Use Perch alongside your other data if you have it, like GPS, heart rate, sprint speed, and more, to gain an understanding of complete athletic performance. Use Perch as a tool for adherence, for motivation, for intent, and for competition. Ultimately, use Perch to help your athletes get better. In future sessions, we'll talk about some of these items in greater depth. I know that you're curious about periodization with velocity-based training alongside more practical information about how you can program with VBT, be it the speed of the rep to dictate the load or using that first rep velocity to dictate when to stop the workout. We'll lean on our practitioners to help provide more practical knowledge in the area of periodization and programming, so stay tuned. We're excited you're here and learning alongside of us. We hope you enjoyed this educational module of weight room performance technology, velocity-based training, and Perch. Everything we discussed was based on the research and from our practitioners. But as research continuously changes and advances, be sure to check back here for more. As a reminder of what we covered, we talked about the history, the current, and the future of weight room technology and velocity-based training. From there, we dug into the research and the science behind velocity-based training, strength training, and performance monitoring as a whole. We then got you more familiar with programming with velocity-based training from velocity zones, percent drop goals, and auto-regulation. We covered a full Perch product tutorial from our web app to tablet app and beyond. And lastly, we discussed the practical implementation of VBT in every single weight room. As a reminder, Perch enables more than just velocity-based training, so keep following along with us as we continue to push the envelope of weight and performance technology and more. Thanks for joining us.